and then you have the floor.
Cool. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. There we go. Okay. So welcome to Thesis Dissertation 101. This workshop is kind of a combination of several other workshops that we used to offer here at the GRC, but in an effort to streamline some things, we kind of made one that covers a lot of bases. So throughout the workshop, I'm going to be talking very generally about some of the main components to the process of writing a thesis or dissertation. And just so you know, I'm not sitting in a room by myself. Lizette and Melvitha are both here with me. There's two people watching this live at the GRC right now. So if they have questions, they'll ask me, and I'll repeat it for everybody else in case you can't hear through my microphone. All right. Oh, and just a little information about myself. I'm a PhD student in anthropology. I'm entering my 4th year working on proposals and my specials exams. My dissertation is going to be focusing on Peruvian immigration to Italy, specifically about the usage of urban space and material culture. So today's workshop is going to concentrate on these 4 basic components of the process of writing your thesis or dissertation. Your research question, working with the committee, the proposal, and planning a dissertation or thesis. And again, because everybody's in different programs at different points in their graduate career, I'm going to be talking very broadly. What each of these look like is going to depend completely on what program and what specialty you are specifically in. So the first thing I want to start out with is this diagram, this matrix. This has been shown to me by several professors, and I've run it by other friends in other departments and other programs, and it seems to fit most projects. It's a very kind of abstract structure, so it tends to work well for a broad range of disciplines. So for a strong thesis or dissertation, you're going to want to have these 4 things really jive in together. So your theory, your questions, your methodology, and your site or evidence all have to be connected in very logical ways. So if you're working on Peruvian immigration to Italy, you don't want your field site to be in the Congo somewhere. It has to actually line up correctly. What each of those things look like, again, is going to depend on your particular discipline or program. You may be using theory that's more related to chemical engineering rather than like a Marxist anthropological approach. Your methodology could be participant observation. It could be a statistical analysis. Your site could be actual physical location, or it could be a set of data that you've collected. So the first component we're going to talk about is the research question. And this is going to be the basic building block for everything else to come in your graduate school career. So the first thing to know is what is and what is not a research question. So a research question is not data. The data is going to be marshaled in a specific way to answer your research question. It's not statistical analysis. Statistical analysis is great, but it's only insofar as it gets you an argument to answer your research question. And it's not knowing the literature of your field. You're going to have to write a literature review, but that's not an end-all in itself. It has to be issued in some way in order to answer this research question. So the argument is the answer you will promote for the research question, and the argument is your thesis statement, the basis of your dissertation or your thesis, depending on which one you're working on. And what is considered an appropriate research question, what's considered to be an appropriate subject of study, all that's really going to depend on your program, on your discipline, on your committee. So those conversations are going to have to start early on, and the research question comes out of a lot of negotiation with your committee members and with other important people in your field. Very, very few people come into graduate school knowing exactly what their research questions are. If they do, most likely they're going to change based on their coursework, based on their readings, based on who they're working with. So some basic things that we can say about research questions across the board. Parts of a winning research question, pardon the Charlie Sheen reference, does it address outstanding theoretical issues in your field? Are there some big gaps in the literature out there that you're really trying to point at with your research? Are there any particular areas where like a geographic region hasn't been represented, a certain population hasn't been represented, specific ways data hasn't been analyzed before? Does it have significance? Does it have ramifications outside of just answering your research question? What are some of the broader, big picture things that it's going to be getting at? And can it be solved? Somebody needs some help in signing in, Felipe. And the last part is, can it be solved? And this goes along with what kind of question you're asking, as well as can you be the one to solve it? If you ask a question that's just way too broad, it's going to take you forever, and it's going to be impossible to answer. If it's too narrow, it may not have the significance outside of your dissertation that funding agencies and job opportunities want them to have. And specifically, can you be the one to solve it? Or can you be the one to answer it? And this will feed into your training that you go through as a graduate student, what kinds of preparations you've gotten in order to do the work of the dissertation or the thesis. Does it require you to speak more than one language? Do you need to know how to do certain types of statistical analyses? All those bits and pieces build up to create a graduate career and point you in the direction of this research question. And so, like I said, you have to strike this balance between broad and narrow. You want it to have broad ramifications, but you don't want it to be so broad that it's unanswerable, and you don't want it to be too narrow that it's not going to have those broad ramifications. Again, this is going to come out of very long conversations with your committee, with other people in your departments. One good way to kind of narrow a question down is to think about specific populations, specific geographic regions, things like that. I'm coming from a social science orientation myself, so these are the things that I go to in my own mind when I'm trying to narrow down a question, but it might work differently in other disciplines. So that brings us to working with a committee. And the research question and the committee are going to go hand in hand. And you've already started doing some of this work of figuring out who's going to be on your committee, who you want to work with when you started applying for graduate school. Most people look at the faculty lists, look at their specializations, and try and figure out who lines up with their research interests and what they want to do with their graduate career. So the main thing is that for your committee, you're going to want to pick people who can support your project. And this may be that they need to be able to intellectually support your project, or also that they could possibly financially support your project. A lot of departments have lots and lots of money, and sometimes graduate students can jump onto grants with professors, and that pays for their dissertation, or at least a lot of their graduate school career. So that might be a factor to think about. But you want committee members who, their research, their teaching, their specialties can really help you hone in on your research question and your dissertation topic. So in order to do this, I would say don't be afraid to have informational interviews with potential committee members or other faculty members. Sit down, have coffee with them, talk about their research interests, see where you line up, see if you actually like them as a person. That may or may not be important to you, but a working relationship is kind of important. Take professors or faculty out for a test drive. Don't be afraid to take classes with them. That's going to be your first step to get to know them as an intellectual, as a scholar. Take classes with them, take readings courses with them if you can, work in their labs, things like that. Read up on them. We have websites for each of the departments. They have tons of information on them. Go ahead and look at their CVs, look at what classes they offer, look at their specializations, look at old articles or books that they might have published to get an idea for their past and current research expertise. Look at who taught them to figure out their intellectual lineage if that's something that might be feeding into your own work. And also figure out if they're going to be around. It's kind of really hard to work with a professor that just retired or is currently on the job market looking for somewhere else to work. If they're not around to see you through your dissertation, it's going to be kind of hard to work with them. I was just talking with some students the other day. Apparently, a lot of professors were jumping ship to go to Australia recently, and some students got left high and dry. So have those conversations. It might take a while to build up to that, to like be able to ask them if they're looking for another job. But start kind of poking around to make sure that they're going to be around to be able to see you through this thing.
I have a
Yeah.
question. Should you only look for tenured professors for your committee then?
I'm sorry, Felipe, I can't hear you.
Should you look only for tenured professors for your committee then?
Tenured professors?
Tenured.
It depends on your program. For anthropology, the tenured thing or not isn't all that important. My own committee, I have one brand new professor, one who's been there for a while that's tenure track, and then another one that's tenured. So it depends who actually matches up with your particular project. Some departments actually require that you have outside committee members. And in those, if they're in another department, it may or may not matter if they're tenure track or if they are tenured. If you're looking outside of the university, sometimes they have more requirements for those people to fulfill those spots. I think for anthropology, it has to be a tenure track professor in an anthropology program for it to count, unless there are some other requirements met. I'm not too sure about that, but each department has their own type of requirements for who's allowed to be on committees. Does that answer your question?
Okay, but if the professors have tenure, then they're not going anywhere, right? So that will be a safe bet.
Right, unless they're retiring. That's always a danger, depending on how your department works. Some professors will actually retire and then see their last few students through the project. I know a couple of professors who were nice enough to do that, but some other times they just kind of jump ship when retirement's up. So this committee, this group of people that you're going to be assembling to work with, your relationship to them is going to be wholly different than when you were an undergrad working with professors. Undergrads tend to be very scared of their professors and don't go talk to them very much. The people who go into graduate school may or may not have had that relationship with the professors. They might be closer to a graduate relationship with them. But you're going to be working very closely with them for what is probably going to seem like forever. But you're going to be working with them for a long time, and you need to have a good working relationship with them. And in that, if you're on the UNM campus, sometimes those lines between personal and professional can blur. I mean, I go to the same yoga place as a couple of my professors, and I see them there, and we're in literally awkward positions sometimes. So those lines can blur, and you just have to figure out what works best for you working with your professors. And don't be afraid to give structure to the working relationship, especially if those lines of personal and professional blur and it just gets a little too messy or whatever for you. Don't be afraid to figure out some structure to those relationships. And a couple of good ways of doing this are to figure out how each committee member prefers to communicate or work. For some professors, they're going to really like for you to do emails, come and check in with our office on a regular basis. Other people might be a little bit more lax about that. Some people might give you their phone number right away and expect you to call them. It depends on who you're working with and what they like to do. So figure out what works best for the two of you or the four of you or however many there are, and figure out a plan of how to communicate. I know I like a lot of structure, so I tend to set more deadlines for myself, whereas my professors may or may not give me those deadlines. I go ahead and give them to myself. Other professors will give me a deadline, and I try and stick to that the best I can. When you're working with a large group like that, it's sometimes hard to really get through a lot of material when you're having meetings. One-on-one tends to be a little bit easier, but if you have a meeting where all of your committee members are together, you have 45 minutes with 3 people and you need to hit these 10 points, go ahead and make meeting agendas. These are useful for the larger group meetings, but sometimes even for like the smaller one-on-one meetings, it's nice to have a plan of attack when you go in to talk to people, especially when you're pressed for time or they're pressed for time and you need to get things done. Calendars and deadlines. These are great, especially if you're a more structured person like me. You like to have these things lined up. You can share those with your professors, create them for yourself, or ask them to make deadlines for you, depending on their work schedule, their teaching load, when they're going to be in and out of town, those kinds of things. And lastly, information sharing. It's very important to make sure everybody's on the same page. It's very, very easy for somebody to get left out of the information loop. So sometimes you'll need to send out memos that kind of summarize meetings just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Some professors might get a little bit weirded out if you go to talk to somebody outside of your committee. So it's good to share information with them about what's going on outside of that committee, just to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page. And in addition to that, the whole deadline thing, making sure people know where you are with progressing through these stages. Okay. So you've got your committee. You're working on getting your committee. Yeah, sorry.
I noticed that a lot of people are like logging in and out. If you're having connection problems, guys, I suggest that you hardwire your computer, especially if you're not on a UNM network. And please use either Internet Explorer or Firefox. Adobe Connect has not been working well with Google Chrome. Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Are you guys' connections all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got your committee, or you're starting to work with the committee, and you've got your research question going into hopefully the final stages when you hit the proposal. But this is going to be the next big kind of hoop that you jump through. And the proposal, again, just like everything else, completely depends on the department and the program that you're in. Some require formal public defenses. Anthropology, you have to schedule like an actual formal defense where you give a presentation, people ask you questions, and then they pass you or fail you, or give you a tentative pass with revisions. Other departments want you to write a proposal, but you don't have to publicly defend it. And others, you don't even have to do any kind of proposal. You just tell your chair what you're going to be working on. Those requirements are all things that you have to take up with your advisors, with your committee chairs, with your departmental people. So 2 important things to always consider throughout your proposal, but a good way to keep yourself on track is check after every paragraph. Are you staying focused on your research question? When you start going through all of these considerations that you need to have for your proposal, it's very easy to start going off in different directions. So make sure everything in your proposal is pointing directly at your research project. Everything is directed straight at answering those research questions. The second thing is to make sure you have your concerns of your committee in mind. This thing has to pass their muster. They're the ones that sign off on this and allow you to continue on. If you completely ignore what they want, it's probably going to have a really hard time in passing. But those types of things, you don't have to blindly follow what your committee says. You can have some negotiations with them about what is actually best for your project. Again, that depends on personalities and things like that. But 99% of the time, it's a negotiation process and making sure it meets expectations, meets goals that they have set for you. So the basic components of a proposal, again, this is going to change depending on what program you're in, are the introduction. This is going to give just a brief introduction to your research question a little bit, just a hint. Your problem statement is going to get more into what your research questions are, what your objective for the study is. The conceptual and theoretical framework, that's going to be some literature review, talk about what gaps this fills in the literature you're looking at, what types of studies have been done that compare to this, what can you contrast it against. Your data collection and analytical methods, this is going to be basically your methodology section. What kind of evidence are you going to collect to answer your research question? How are you going to do it? Are you going to do interviews? Are you going to do some sort of testing with biological samples? How are you going to get that data? What kind of statistical analysis are you going to use? All those things go into that section. The fifth section, or fifth component, is the significance. What is the broader implications of your work, whether it's broader implications within the discipline or broader implications within the nation, the world, the city, however broad you want to take it. That part tends to be a little harder for some people if they're not in an applied science or if they're not in a hard science, but it's an important part that your committee is going to be looking for, and also if you're giving this up for grant proposals, that's going to be something that a lot of grants are going to look for. Like NSF has a whole section about the broader implications. And then the last part is your timeline. This is going to be basically your schedule for completion. Those methodologies that you listed in the data collection and analytical method section, this is where you're going to elaborate how long it's going to take you to do each of those things. So I'm going to go out into the field. I'm going to do 50 interviews. It's going to take me 7 months. I'm going to have that section completed by this date. Or it can be separated into phases of your research. So phase 1 includes this, this, and this. I'm going to have it done within 2 months. Phase 2 is this, this, and this. I'm going to have it done 3 months from the end of phase 1. Break it down. It shows that you're prepared. You know your plan of attack for getting the research done for the dissertation or the thesis, and it shows that you're committed to getting this whole mess over with in a very timely manner. So the best way to figure out what a proposal looks like is to actually look at one. And unfortunately, there's not a cache of proposals that I know of on UNM's campus. There's one for dissertations and theses, but I don't think that there's one for proposals. If anybody knows of one, please let me know. But the best advice I can give is to go to your department and talk to the faculty, administrators, and ask if they have any past proposals on file that you can look at to get an idea of what these things look like. Especially since they change depending on your program and discipline, the best thing to do is go directly to the source and find some good examples. Another strategy is to ask friends and other past students who have passed through that phase to share theirs with you. Professors sometimes will actually just give you their dissertation proposal and let you look at it. That's also a good way to figure out what they're looking for, especially if they're on your committee. But the best way to figure out how to write a proposal is to actually just go ahead and read one. So you've passed the proposal, you have your research questions down, your committee is working pretty well. The next thing to do, and you've finished all of your research, the next thing to do is planning the writing of the thesis or the dissertation. So think back to that matrix that we had at the very beginning. Let's see here. That one. That's going to be kind of the basis for writing your dissertation. And then your research questions and your proposal are going to be the building block for your plan of attack. You've already done a lot of the legwork for setting yourself up for success in this process. Go ahead and use what you have at your disposal. Your research questions are going to be the things that the whole dissertation is aimed at, and the proposal gives you kind of the background of what you've done or what you planned to do originally to get this research done. So how long is a dissertation? This completely depends on how long it takes to defend the research. So the good way to think of this is it takes the dissertation is as long as it takes to defend the research, but no longer. Again, this depends on your disciplines. So in math, sometimes the dissertations are 50 to 80 pages. Biology, 4 to 5 papers. And in anthropology, it's around 400 pages, or I saw one that was over 600 recently. Or they have the option of 3 papers plus an introduction and a conclusion. So it ends up being about the same length, but you have 3 separate things going on. Yeah. And it should be as long as your committee decides it should be. Everything is based on whether or not your committee is going to pass your work. So have that negotiation early on. It actually starts when you're starting to talk about your research questions. If your research question is really, really broad, it's going to take a lot longer to answer it than if it's narrower. So when you're in those negotiations of your research question with your committee, that's actually starting the negotiation of how long your dissertation has to be. So just like a proposal, the best way to figure out what a dissertation looks like is to actually go and read, look at one or a few dissertations. And one of the resources that we have here at UNM is actually the Lobo Vault. This is the online repository for past theses and dissertations, and they have thousands of them on there, I believe. But we'll actually go ahead and go and take a look at the website so you can see what it looks like. And its repository, here, let's see if I can get it pulled up. It's repository.unm.edu. And this is the main Lobo Vault website. Let's see. What program are you on?
College of Education.
College of Education. So we're going to look for a College of Education dissertation. And I've played around with the website, but the easiest way to get to theses and dissertations is actually to click on theses and dissertations right here. There's other ways of going through, but that seems to be the fastest. And then you have your option of doctoral dissertations or theses and papers here. So we're going to do doctoral dissertations. And then, so I'm going to look for education. So we have educational leadership, educational linguistics, educational psychology.
There's one for special education.
Sure. And then we also have special education. So we have, let's go for PhD, since there's some in there. And it brings up recent additions. And then, let's see. Let's go ahead and just pick the first one for an example. And so it brings up the title, the author, the advisor to that person, their committee member, their department and the university that they're at, some keywords for the subject, the degree level that it was submitted to fulfill. It has your abstract, and then you actually have the link to the file right there. So you can download their dissertation for free and have an example. There's other ways to look through it. You can look for specific people who have written dissertations. You can search for titles, and you can search for subjects. So if you know that somebody that graduated 3 years ahead of you and you have their name, they wrote a really good dissertation, you can go on here and search for it. Okay. Are these only for dissertations within UNM? Yes, Lobo Vault is specifically for UNM. Some dissertations from other universities are available through the library website. You can search for them through like Web of Knowledge and things like that. I don't know what exactly our access is through UNM for other universities' dissertations. Sometimes you can get access to other university databases and search through their holdings. You can ILL a lot of dissertations if you know where it is, who did it, what the title is, that kind of stuff. But one thing I would caution is not to just pull up any old dissertation that's on the website. They all are good enough for a PhD or a master's, but everybody had different committees. And so they all fulfill slightly different requirements. So ask your faculty that are on your committee for suggestions of specific dissertations to look at. You don't want to look at one and use it as your closest model that your committee chair just absolutely hated. That's probably not going to be the smartest decision. So look at ones that your faculty actually suggest are good models for what a dissertation should look like. Okay, so some strategies for writing this thing. The outline is going to be your most powerful tool. And this is often the first thing that your committee is going to ask you for. They're going to ask you for the outline and for some sort of direction that you're going to go in so that they don't think that you're just kind of sitting around not doing anything. It's going to give them the structure that they need to keep tabs on your progress, plus it's going to keep you the structure to keep progressing. And the more detailed it is, the easier it may be. It can be whatever you want it to be. But I've found, and my friends have found, that the more detailed the outline is, the easier it is to actually write. So go ahead and use citations, include page links, word counts, and other details. They're going to help you just flesh out the outline. As you start filling in those details and expanding on those points, the outline basically just writes the dissertation for you. It's not that easy. It's not literally going to write it for you, but it'll make the process a lot easier. And it breaks it down into really usable, easy to digest chunks. Should I specify how many pages I'll write? That's a good thing to talk about with your committee before you start to get an idea of what you're aiming at. Obviously, it's going to change based on what types of evidence, what kinds of arguments you start making throughout. It also depends on your particular discipline, what kinds of questions you're asking. But to have an idea of how long of a dissertation you're aiming for is a really good thing to start out with, so that you're not thinking that like 100 pages I'm going to be done, but then your committee has that unspoken kind of, oh, well, we were thinking 300 pages. So you think that you're finished with your dissertation, but you're only a third of the way there. So start having those conversations really early on, and then use that as a guideline. Like if you know that it's going to be approximately 30 pages to finish, go ahead and plan for it to be 30 pages. If it grows or shrinks, that'll be a conversation that you have when you get to that point. Oh, thanks, Kelly. This is just an example of a dissertation, or an excerpt from a dissertation outline that I stole from a friend. But you can see that they have very specific sections. I'm looking at the screen behind me. We've got very specific sections, citations, we've got word counts, all those kinds of things. If it helps, you can even write or make it different color codes based on whether a section needs more elaboration, whether it's finished. Pretty much any information that you want in an outline, go ahead and add it if it's going to help you. It doesn't have to be anywhere near this elaborate, but it's whatever works for you.
Why does like under development paleontology?
Where is that?
Right there,
Okay.
right, 1876, it has 400 words. Why do they have 400 words there?
Okay, so she's asking about the word counts.
Yeah.
So like this bullet point would translate into 400 words. So we've got some basic information here, but that would be expanded to 400 words. It just depends on exactly what you think that you need to elaborate on in that section and how much you need to elaborate. Does that make sense?
I think so.
So you would be writing about these two sources,
In 400
and
words.
you would
Or
just
around
estimate
400.
around 400 words would be enough to get across what you need. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So some other strategies are utilizing writing groups or writing circles. You're on a campus with a lot of graduate students, and a few of them have to be writing PhDs at the same time that you are. So utilize your peers. Writing groups are a great way to keep each other on track. You can check in and make sure that each of you is making some progress every week or every other week. You can talk about the problems that you've been having. Some people may have really good strategies for how to get through writer's block, or may have some good tips for you about how to actually negotiate your daily writing schedule. You can even review each other's actual work, like the content. Talk about whether or not your argument is strong. What kinds of evidence are you missing? Are you using a theory correctly? Are you having an issue with commas? Like, it can go from very structural content types of things to the nitpicky editing types of things. And three general groups of people that you want to look at for this are your peers, so people who are in your program going through the same steps, or people outside of your program that are in the same kind of process of writing their dissertations or theses. Your professors and professionals, so your committee are the ones who are going to be judging this thing, maybe get some eyes on it from them. Other professors in the department, other professionals at the university that overlap. And then lastly, experts. If you go to a national conference, maybe you'll run into somebody who you cite a lot in your dissertation, or you know that they're working on something similar. Maybe you can get up the nerve to ask them to review your paper for you or your dissertation. And a lot of the times, if you've really worked on the significance of your work for the discipline and for broader impacts, it's going to make it really, really attractive to those people to want to read your work, to want to help you develop this dissertation. So they're going to be invested in the furthering of knowledge in that area and will be willing to read it. Another strategy is to get that calendar out and just fill it up. So you can develop a calendar for each stage of the project. You can develop a long-term calendar that's going to cover the entire dissertation if you think that you can plan it out that far. You don't have to stick to those long-term goals. You can even set something up that goes day to day. Oops, somebody's frozen. Felipe's on it. You can figure out day-to-day goals. You can figure out a work schedule. If you know that Thursday mornings you're going to be free for 4 hours, you want to set that aside for writing, perfect. Anything to add some structure and to add some specific goals so that your writing process gets broken up into smaller, very manageable chunks is going to be awesome. Cool. And then while you're writing, keep in mind the rule of threes. This will make the flow of your dissertation work a lot easier, or work a lot better. So the rule of three is basically to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And this works at different scales for the dissertation. So for the whole thesis or dissertation, your intro is going to tell the reader what the dissertation is about. It's going to say what it's going to say, or say what it's going to say. The body is going to be the details of the work. So all of that research that you did, the literature, everything is going to be in that section. And the conclusion is going to conclude. It's going to give a summary of what you talked about, and then some concluding points. Oops. Going down smaller now. So we have the whole dissertation. Now each chapter is going to follow the same basic pattern. The introduction to the chapter is going to say what the chapter is going to be about. The body is the details of the work, and the conclusion is the summary and the concluding points. Think about when you're pressed for time and you're reading a book really quick for class. You usually go to the introduction and the conclusion to get all the main basic ideas, and then you go to the middle for all the meat. But all of the basic information is really easy to find. That's what you want to happen for your dissertation. And then even smaller now, we have each paragraph is going to follow the basic rule of three. The first part of the paragraph is going to link to the previous paragraph. You have the middle of the paragraph, and then you conclude and link to the next paragraph. This is going to help the flow of your whole dissertation run really smoothly without having to go through extreme signposting where you say, first I'm going to do this, second, third, fourth, and then just keep repeating that. If you follow this kind of structure, it's going to nest everything really nicely and help you move through each of your points really smoothly. As far as references go, the best thing that I can say is to get a system and just get it organized. A lot of people tend to have just giant stacks of paper, books, all over their desks, and it's really unwieldy. If you have some sort of system, it's going to make it a lot easier. There's a lot of bibliographic software out there that you can utilize. One is EndNote. This is the one that I use. It's really cool. There's workshops on on EndNote and Zotero. I like EndNote because it actually links your PDFs directly to your citation. In your citation, you have an option to put in a bunch of notes, so you don't have to keep looking back at notebooks and things. You can actually just have everything on one screen. And then you have the option to cite while you write. You start writing somebody's last name, and it'll populate the citation for you. Zotero is another bibliographic software that works wonderfully. One of the consultants here at the GRC uses it. There's RefWorks and other online reference software that you can use. Like I said, each of EndNote and Zotero have workshops through the GRC, but also we have the research libraries over at Zimmerman or wherever your particular library is. They are amazing at helping you figure these things out. They can go through some of the more detailed bits and pieces of software program, They may have other strategies for helping you get your references in line. But ultimately, the better organized your notes and your references are, the easier the writing process is going to be. You're not going to have to go back 5,000 times and check references and look up dates and pages and things like that. You're just going to have it all right there ready for you to go. So just when you're writing, just go ahead and get out that first crappy draft. Like, nothing in the world stops the writing process worse than staring at a blank page on your computer or in a notebook. The easiest way to get over that is just to start writing. Even if you're not writing your dissertation right away, write about why you absolutely hate starting writing. Like, just get it going, and then it'll start flowing. And then go back and worry about the editing process. Get out that first draft, get all of your ideas out, and then go back and refine your language, your argument, where your commas are, those kinds of things. And again, through the editing and revising process, writing groups or circles are really strong tools that you can use. In the initial writing stages, they're great for helping you make sure that you're staying on track. When you're editing and revising, they're really good at going through and helping you strengthen your argument, making sure your logic flows correctly, making sure you're not missing huge chunks of your research. When you're trading papers with peers, be absolutely ruthless with the red pen. Just really, really be mean about it. Because the meaner you are to them, well, within reason, the meaner you are to them with a red pen, the meaner they're gonna be to you, and your writing is just gonna improve that much more. If they're really, really annoyed with the fact that you pointed out that they have incomplete sentences, likely they're gonna look for those in your work. So there's a give and take there. And then also, if it's just not working anymore for you, step away and come back to it later. If you get too close to what you're working on, a lot of the times it starts turning into gibberish, but you don't realize it. And you go back to it later and you just don't understand what you were writing. So step away, come back to it with fresh eyes. Don't take too much time off, because then it's just it's very easy to get off track. Or you'll forget about what you were writing completely, and that's not a good thing. You want to have fresh eyes, but not completely new eyes. So some basic concluding key points. I know we moved through a lot of information really quickly, and it was kind of general because each of these things needs to be tailored specifically to your own department. But some basic things are to keep in mind this matrix that we have up here. Your theory, your questions, your methodology, and your cite or evidence all have to be working together to produce a really strong thesis or dissertation. Secondly, communication and your committee are key. I think I repeated it maybe 7 times throughout this thing. Your committee are the ones who are going to pass or fail you. They're the Caesars of the whole situation. Make sure you're communicating with them about your progress. Make sure you're communicating with them about their expectations for your work. Thirdly, structure is your new best friend. As easy as you can make this process for yourself, the better. If you have outlines, calendars, deadlines, things like that, they're going to stay on track and get this thing done a lot more smoothly. And last, you're not alone. There are other people on this campus going through the same process, and they are some of your best advocates. If you need to meet and commiserate about how much you absolutely hate the writing process, they're there for you. If you need somebody to look over your paper, they're there for you. In addition to your peers, thank you, Felipe. In addition to your peers, we have the GRC here as one example of a great resource for while you're going through this writing process. There's writing groups that get facilitated here. There's writing boot camps, all kinds of awesome resources so that you're not alone. And Lanisha, I hope I said that right, is right there with you. So go ahead and, go ahead and talk with your friends and other people that you meet hanging around campus and start networking for people that can actually help you through this process. There are 2 people in the room with me right now that I'm sure are raring to go now. I don't know. That boot camps are very useful. So for anybody who doesn't know, yeah, For anybody who doesn't know, the GRC actually sponsors boot camps here in our center. We have week-long and weekend-long, and these are 5 days and 2 days of really intensive writing. And you come in, you get put into small working groups, you set goals for the day or for the week or for the weekend, and you help each other out through that whole process. You come together in the morning, you come together in the afternoon, and it's just a really nice kind of like working hum kind of situation. There's 10 or 15 other people here that are just chugging along writing. So you're not sitting alone in your apartment staring at your computer all day long. You actually have other people that are around trying to work on the same type of stuff. So, are there any questions? You can either, if you have a microphone, you can just yell them out or type them in and I can respond. Do y'all have any questions in person?
No.
When is the next weekend boot camp? It is the 22nd and 23rd of September. And you can actually email the GRC at unmgrc@unm.edu, and you can register for the boot camps that way. I don't think that the one in September is full yet, but double check with Anne. You can call our office. You got in today? So we have one person here that's in the September boot camp. So hopefully there's still some
I think
spaces.
there's no spaces.
Yeah.
I was able to get into.
Okay, good.
Guys, while we're doing the last questions, I would like to invite you to fill out our evaluation. Just look for the link in your browser. It should pop up right now. It will be in your browser, and I'm also copying it to the chat window. Please don't forget to fill out the evaluation so we can improve our services to you guys. Thank you for joining us, Suzanne. Hope Suzanne, whatever you go for.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks to Daniel for a great and enriching presentation and for allowing us to film you.
Nobody told me that.
iStar was born today.
Yeah. Hopefully he comes back. Doesn't know how to turn this off.
Guys, don't forget the evaluations, okay? They are anonymous. Is there any other questions before I stop the recording? I don't want to stop if there is still content. Any more questions for Daniel? No? Okay, don't forget the evaluations. If you haven't downloaded the files for this presentation, please do so now. And I'm stopping the recording